All right, let's call to order the workshop for the Lee County Board of County Commissioners. It's August 25th, 2020, and all commissioners are now present and accounted for. I'd like to hand it over to Mr. DeGillet to make a few county manager comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, commissioners and everyone. We have this budget workshop document labeled as final draft. Of course, you can make changes at any time up through the final public hearing in September, but based on previous conversations, this is our interpretation of the instructions that you have given us, and we have one or two outstanding items which Pete will cover with us in just a minute. Pete will go through the budget, the operating budget, and then we have a break in the slides, and you can decide whether or not you want to revisit capital projects or not. Those have not changed since the last two conversations with you, so it'll be your call.
Okay. When
we get there, if that works.
And real quick, commissioners, it's a workshop. Feel free to jump in and ask questions whenever you want. And all right, let's go for it.
All right, go ahead, Pete.
Thank you, Roger. Good afternoon, commissioners. So this is your final and third workshop on the budget. And you have before you the final draft of the 2021 continuation budget and the final capital improvement major maintenance plan. Then our public hearings are set for 5:05 p.m. September 3rd, which is a Thursday, the first budget public hearing, and then September 15th, the final hearing. That was the schedules. As Roger said, there are no changes since August 4th. There's a couple outstanding items, and there's also some information from the state that we'd like to share with you that we received in August. And then we'll review just briefly the ongoing challenges, go through the general fund budget, and then there's a break after the operating slides. We can go into the CIP major maintenance again, which we did in pretty good detail August 4th if you want to. If not, we can skip over that to questions. And then the questions, are you okay with this draft for the first public hearing, which is not this Thursday, but the following Thursday, and is there anything additional you would like considered? Something we want to talk to just up front briefly is going into these challenging fiscal times with COVID-19, the response and the impacts on the economy. There's a few things that we are focusing on as fiscal priorities, at least from the staff level, which is maintain service levels, keep capital projects on track. That was a goal also during the recession. When the economy dips during a cycle, if the county can keep its capital projects on track, the money that we're spending on capital projects is being reinvested in the economy. It's paying for local wages. It's paying for local workers and companies. So as much as possible, we try and keep capital projects on track as a top priority during these times. Mitigate revenue losses. I shared with you last time what we're doing in that regard. And then repay general fund debt. We're kind of toward the end stage of repaying a whole lot of general fund debt over the next few years, and we have factored that into all of our modeling. So the increase in the tax base, general fund 6.96%. You can see the other funds, and I want to jump just quickly to the next slide to show you kind of some information that we received in August. So what this shows is the taxable property values county-wide since just right before the recession, during the recession, and then after the recession during the growth expansion. June 6th, the lower numbers there are the percentage increases that we had factored into our long-term modeling in June, so 4.1%, 3.2%, 4%, and then 4.8 and 4.8 for the next 5 years. That was based on a January revenue estimating conference that the state did, where their percentages then were actually 5. So we took 1% or 2%, depending on the year, away from those percentages just to do a little more conservative modeling. In August, the Revenue Estimating Conference had an ad valorem conference, and so they revised the next 5 years, and that's what you see in blue. So 3.5%, 3.7% in 2022, that's when we hit the tax base countywide that we had prior to the recession, 3.9% then for the following 3 years. So you can see the revisions downward that we did for our modeling in June are very close to what the state came up with, and that's what we've got our modeling based on now. Probably wouldn't change that because it doesn't change things dramatically until they have another conference in January.
Wait, question. I'm not clear on the difference between the last 5 years. I see the county in orange, but what do you call it? I'm looking at gray or.
That's
3.5 to 3.7, the top line as opposed to the bottom.
That's from the August Revenue Estimating Conference that the state did for Lee County.
What we were showing when we were tentatively adopting the budget. Well, we only would have been concerned with 2021 at that time, yes?
Yes.
Correct.
So that was based on the previous state figures, and these are the latest state figures at the bottom?
No, the latest state figures are at the top there, 3.5, 3.7, 3.9. And the figures that we had revised downward in June are 4.1, 3.2, 4.0. So we're very close to what the state ultimately
So Commissioner, the property values increase at 6.96. That is the accurate number for this budget. And then starting in 2021 and forward for that 5-year period.
Forget I asked because that doesn't matter for our purposes here today.
That's
just
correct.
Looking ahead. And,
yes, sir.
Okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Well, real quick, Pete, before you move on from that slide, I did want to ask, so, basically in that first year, it's about a 60 basis point or 0.6% difference there. What would that do to your model? What are the consequences of the Revenue Estimating Conference projections versus what you had come up with?
It won't have a significant impact on the modeling because you can see the following year we're at 3.2% and the state's at 3.7%. So when we get the next projection from the state in January, we will remodel
Gotcha.
those.
Okay, very good.
And so we factored in quite a bit of revenue loss in fiscal year 2021. You can see the total revenue in the general fund for this year was $467 million. Tax base increase of 6.96% adds approximately $22 million. But then we had a reduction in other revenues, which I'll show on the following slide, the significant ones of more than $16 million. So that net increase in the general fund is about $6 million.
Jump in, Commissioner.
That 16.6, is that a projection for the whole year?
Yes. Yeah. And the two biggest revenues making up that reduction are state sales tax sharing, which is the 6% sales tax that the state charges, and all counties through formula get a share of that as well as cities. And then county revenue sharing, which is another portion of state sales tax and cigarette taxes. So you can see the projection for 2021 is $42.2 million. These are state estimates for the coming year. We've received those before we've completed the budget. And the state estimate for county revenue sharing is $15.6 million. So those actual estimates we've input into the budget and into our modeling. This is revenue declines that we've experienced so far this year based on COVID-19. Much of it was a result of when the county shut down and the safer at home order by the governor when folks weren't moving about. And we suspended a number of charges. We suspended bus fares, suspended parks, meters for a while, You can see sales tax sharing, revenue sharing, well, tourist tax is the biggest decline. In the general fund, sales tax sharing and revenue sharing are the largest declines. May and June, there were significant declines. In July, it started to come back. So, and haven't gotten August, probably get August in, probably after the first budget hearing, but possibly before it, but hopefully that'll trend up better also.
Hit your microphone there, Ray. There you go.
Sorry. On the tolls, 2.6 million invoices outstanding, do we expect to recapture that, or?
Yes. Yep. So the difference would be when there was the Safer at Home order and people just weren't going across the bridges. As well as reduced traffic from tourism.
Does that affect our ability to pay those bonds?
No.
No, we're okay.
Yeah, we have sufficient coverage.
Excellent.
Question on the VCB, that 8 million decrease,
Yes.
that only affects the VCB. If there's none of that inures to the benefit of the county revenues and our general operations, our work. VCB money can only be used for VCB projects and operational and advertising and that sort of thing. Correct? Yes. So this, I mean, it's not going to, other than that window.
Yes, sir. There are three categories of spending for for bed tax dollars, and it doesn't affect bond payments. It does not have an effect on the portion of those dollars that go for maintenance to the professional baseball stadiums and a few of the other project categories. That $8.4 million loss really doesn't slow anything down.
It's not going to affect the bottom line on our deliberations as we move toward the first hearing for adopting a budget and the second hearing.
That's
when
correct.
we adopt it. So, but we will deal with it internally within the VCB budget. That's
Yes,
all.
sir. Yeah, the adjustment is fairly simple to make. We have more than adequate reserves to adjust internally with the VCB budget, but you're correct. It has no bearing on the general fund
Is there
operating budget.
anything in here that's going to deal with the internals of the VCB budget? I mean, do we have to deal with that now in
No, sir.
anticipation of the 8.4 million reduction?
No, sir.
No, Commissioner, not at this point. And also, the first 6 months of this fiscal year, the tourist tax revenues were breaking records. So this is month to month for those months. However, we don't expect it'll be down 8 million for the entire fiscal year. More like about 6 million, 5 to 6 million.
And then, of course, when the governor lifts the final restrictions and goes to the next phase of opening the state,
We hope for an improvement.
I would absolutely expect a huge improvement, not only in bed tax collections, but in the 10% unemployment rate as well.
You'd bet your job on it.
I would. This morning, I was telling the commissioner that, that's my opinion, and I could be wrong, but this afternoon, yeah, I'll bet my job on it.
Pretty cocky. Be careful about that.
So, looking at the departments on this slide, obviously we've got significant reserves in each of these areas. Have you been also kind of cutting spending and balance, right-sizing the budget to balance with the losses, or have we been dipping into reserves? What's been the...
We haven't dipped into any reserves. No.
Not dipped into any reserves. We went and cut spending then to match with the losses.
Yeah, we've slowed down spending also. Some of these losses are mitigated by the fact that we budget 95% of property tax revenues each year, but we collect about 1% more, so that equals $4 million this year. So that'll mitigate that revenue loss.
Yes, sir. And what we did, and also on hiring, we did not put a hard stop on hiring, refilling positions. Each position, when it's vacated, there must be justification provided the assistant county manager that's responsible for that department, and we have not filled all positions. So that's one area, pretty substantial savings.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, thank you.
This slide it's not completely up to date because some departments have received some more funding through the CARES Act. But the distinction I want to make here for the next slide is that LeeTran received CARES Act money through the Federal Transit Administration. It's not the direct allocation from the Treasury that the county is operating its Lee CARES programs with. And that money can be used over the next 3 years basically to operate the system. And so I'm going to show you kind of what we anticipate to do. The general fund always has a subsidy for LeeTran for a portion of its budget. And you can see that we're going to draw down of that $19 million, about $900,000 this fiscal year, about $9.6 million in FY 2021, and about $8.7 million in FY 21-22. So you can see that'll reduce the subsidy that needs to come from the general fund for a couple of years, and we'll ease back into the full subsidy after that. So that will help mitigate some of the revenue losses also.
You know, it's interesting, you mentioned we would ease back into the full subsidy after that. Could we also, I assume, are going to work on trying to reduce the subsidy too, so that it's not so big when we come back into it?
Yeah, we have been reducing the subsidy, and that's the goal, yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so this fiscal year 2021 is the last year of kind of a low debt environment for our general fund debt, which is related to the Justice Center downtown and parking garage and jails and the sheriff's jail expansion and evidence building. And then our debt service bumps up for the next 6 years in order to pay off that debt. It's completely paid in 26-27. So I'm just showing this that we're on track to repay this debt. It's been factored into all the future modeling we do, and I'll show you a couple graphs and a couple slides that shows those models. And also we've been sinking money as we go along in order to reduce the impact of that large payment in fiscal year 24-25.
Wait a minute. Explain to me again the year 24-25.
In 24-25, you have a $25 million payment, and we will have sunk $10 million in the 4 years prior to that in order to use it that year, so that you don't have a big hit to your budget that year for $25 million. The hit's only $15 million.
So that strange graph looks, that's just to say this would happen if we hadn't been so smart?
Commissioner,
It's really the dark numbers I'm looking at?
yeah, Commissioners, in the 24-25, we have a total debt payment of $25 million that year, but we put $10 million in the savings account, so that in that year, your general fund hit, new money is only $15 million. So yes, sir, that's because we're so damn smart.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I wanted to give us a credit.
Yeah.
Yeah, take it.
Well, that would, Commissioner Sandelli helped us with that one last year.
Well, you could see 4 years ahead then too, couldn't you?
Yes, sir.
And then I'll focus on fiscal year 2021 in the next slide. But what this shows is your additional investment primarily in transportation projects, public safety, and water quality projects, as well as Conservation 2020 replenishment over the last 7 years. And this is either a combination of growth increment funding or excess reserves that we've used for these projects. $166 million.
So, Commissioners, this investment of the $166 million over time, this is all about the general fund policies that you've approved over the last 6 or 7 years that allow us to generate the growth increment funds or the use of excess reserves following you're establishing a 20% reserve level for the general fund. So, you know, all those dollars that are above that 20%, we're able to slide over to the infrastructure and to the infrastructure fund. So between growth increment and excess reserves in particular, you know, we're able to make that $166 million investment without a tax increase anywhere.
Yes, sir.
Roger, on that note, you talk about the growth increment funding. It's been a great asset to us the last 4 years. Do we have a total number, say for the last 4 or 5 years, how much money we acquired through the growth increment funding? I mean, I know it's $166 million now total for this budget year, but I know, Pete, I know we talked about it last year, and I know you had the number somewhere. If you don't have it today, it's fine. We can get it later. I was just curious to have that number because, you know, those are real numbers or actual figures that actually money is being used throughout the county. And what's so great about the growth increment funding is it's not restricted. We don't have to use only certain things. How some people want to continue to preach about impact fees being the best revenue source, where the growth increment funding actually exceeds that number and actually has less restrictions. So just in the future, if you don't have it today, if I could get that number total, since we've been using that practice as far as budget, I think it's been 4 years, 5 years now.
Yeah.
The total acquired for growth increment funding.
Yeah, it's north of $60 million. I'll get you the exact figure.
Right. Yeah, and it's been averaging 10 to 12 million a year. So just, you know.
And this is the 6th year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's probably about 70 or 80 then if it's like 10. Well, it could be 12. I think 1 year was 9.7, 1 year was 11.2.
Quick addition to my head, and it's just north of $70 million. When you add the excess reserves to that, based on the 20% reserve policy on the general fund, that's what bumps it up to the 166.
So it's excess of $70 million, and we never actually increased taxation.
Oh, absolutely.
Or regulations against the current
That's correct.
population of Lee County, and we extra money we put back in the county without any restrictions to it.
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah,
This is a great.
it's a great program.
That's why I want to know the number for the future to talk about the budget over the next year.
Yeah, we'll give you the exact number.
Okay, and then this is slides you're all very familiar with, because this is what we use to show where we are in the general fund. As you saw on a previous slide, the revenue this year in the general fund's $467 million, but the net increase for next year is to $472 million, and then all of the expenses in the general fund are $454 million. So you have a continuation surplus of $18.7 million. We do have placeholder. One outstanding issue is wage increase. The sheriff has programmed a 3% wage increase in his budget request. Additionally, the tax collector and property appraiser, their budgets are approved by the state, by the Department of Revenue, and the governor, when he signed the state budget for fiscal year 2021 included a 3% increase across the board to begin October 1st. And our recommendation is 3% for the balance of the employees in the general fund.
If I could, Chairman. Roger, I would say great job on the budget this year. And I just want to say, Lee County employees really stepped over the last 6 months as we see what's going on in this building across the street with Lee Cares. And I just want to commend you and your staff throughout the departments for stepping up. And, when even the private sector maybe we're out of work, the county employees took on extra work. And I just want to thank you and your staff and all the employees of Lee County stepping up during this crisis. And they show their true colors. We do it every year. 2 years ago, the hurricane. Now this year is this issue, so this crisis. So thank you to the employees. And it shows why that dedicated service, they deserve this, actually deserve more, but we're able to do this without any raising of taxes. So thank the employees for doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sure that there are some number of employees who are able to watch this online today, and they appreciate your words.
Thank you.
I was talking to a county employee who mentioned they haven't gotten merit increases, though, in years. And could you just talk about why this is a better way of doing it than the merit increases?
So, Commissioner, we're in about 27 distinctly different businesses. And to create a merit program that's going to be equitable across the board and manage, we have just not been able to figure out a way to do that equitably. We've had merit programs in the past, and there are always claims of favoritism that are sometimes warranted, and it's almost impossible to manage. What we have found is that sort of the easiest and most equitable way to treat all the employees is just a general across-the-board pay increase, and it avoids favoritism. It forgive me for saying this out loud, but it kind of holds the labor organizations at bay. The last year or so, there was a group took a pretty hard run at our transit operation to organize, and they just couldn't get enough signature cards because we've made this effort and a conscious decision to be the employer of choice in the region, and with that comes a cost. But also there's a cost savings and benefit to that. We've got a fairly low employee turnover rate, and we don't have the cost of the labor organizations that could easily gain a foothold during difficult economic times. So there's a lot of moving parts to it, but we really do believe that as a matter of policy and philosophically speaking, that the across-the-board raises are the most equitable way to treat our employees, given the number of distinctly different businesses that we operate.
And there is a certain element here that is also recognition of hard work done.
Yes, sir.
But it's collectively on the staff. Collectively, we think the whole group of county employees have done a great job, and the whole group of county employees is getting the 3%. Because the cost of, a lot of employees who have talked to me about it say it's just a cost of living increase. And it's a lot larger than what the cost of living increase has been. This year, maybe cost of living has gone up quite a bit, but in previous years.
Commissioner, I just lost my thought.
If you look at the cost of living, you got to look at per region. You got to look at the cost. I don't know what it is this year. I think last year it was like 1.8. So you got to look at the region you live in for housing, to add all that into housing, cost of living, commodities, and everything. So I've had the same conversation with people too. But I will tell you, from dealing with other cities and counties in the past that had merit raises, you do have issues with discriminatory. You have supervisors that don't recognize somebody. So you got somebody that wants to basically be out and about by themselves, as a park ranger, for example, and they do a great job, but they just don't get the recognition of being seen every day by their supervisor. So that person may not get the same merit raise as somebody else that actually is in the boss's face every day. So it's better, like Roger said, it's easier when you have this many employees. And you take, for example, the Port Authority has merit raises, and if you look at per capita how many employees we have at the Port Authority compared to Lee County wide, and you look at the past history of employee issues or lawsuits or what it may be, you'll see there's more of that when you have merit raises. You have a little less morale, worse morale when you have that, because it's basically he said, she said, he got something I didn't get, she didn't get something. So it's always that issue when you have that. And for example, you can look at that agency itself, the amount of employees, and look at those issues you've had with different agencies out there. The police department they had 2 years ago out there, and other employees within those departments.
Commissioner, and I have collected my thoughts. You mentioned that it takes all the employees to get this work done, and the truth is, we, unlike a lot of organizations, some do, but unlike a lot of organizations, we cross-train a great many of our employees. So when, for example, we put up the Lee Cares program over that 2-week period, those are employees that came from multitudes of departments, and they were able to make the transition to do that kind of work because of cross-training, because of the kind of integrity that our employees have, because they're a happy group of employees, they're satisfied. And while they're doing that, the employees left in the departments are picking up the extra workload. And so it's between a generally very satisfied employee population and cross-training and the way we treat employees. We have a zero tolerance for discrimination and bullying and retaliation, and we've taken action over the last couple of years to remove people from the organization that have fallen into that trap. And so what we have today is probably the most satisfied employee population that I've seen in a long, long time, and it shows in their work.
Excellent. Commissioner Sandelli?
I don't know how you measure anything against this year, because it's been such a crazy year and so many people have stepped up. So, I go back to that term that you created, one org. And I think when you think as one organization and you have this stabilized increase as opposed to things that are flying all over the place, I think it leads into that stabilization that we're all looking for, whether it's in a lot of different ways. I went through this, and I'm not a spreadsheet guy, but I went through this line by line, and And I had some questions, you know, what is the right number based on what inflation is or is not, so on and so forth. And I think I talked to some of the staff, and I struggled with that a little bit. But Joey's looking for some clarity. I think when the governor came out with his challenges on a broader base to look at 3% across the state, and I know he's dealing with some challenges that kind of solidified in my own mind that we're probably at a right number that we've got plugged in here. So I think two things. One is stabilization and what we do, the one org situation, and a benchmark that's outside of our own control, I think kind of matched up. And here comes the hurricane. So thank you.
Run. Commissioners, and I would like to acknowledge, too, that, you know, this 3% annually cannot be an entitlement. These decisions have to be made on an annual basis. We have to have a sustainable salary, wage and benefit program. But depending on economic conditions and a lot of other factors, you know, there may be years in which it simply isn't possible. But, you know, if that's going to happen, we're going to want we want to do enough analysis that we have some sense of comfort that we may have a problem in any one year, so that we can talk with employees, you know, and solicit their help as we, you know, get close to making those kinds of decisions. So I know everyone really appreciates this conversation today, but, you know, tomorrow, I mean, next year, who knows? We don't know what property values are going to be like just yet. We will just have to wait and see, you know, for several more months yet. But for this year, you know, we're in good shape.
If I could, you got to look back where we came from. If you look back 10 years ago, there was many years there, the county, you know, Commissioner, I think it was what, $48 million, $28 million deficit we had. We had to lay off 74 people. The first year I was here in 2012 and 13. So we've had times where we went backwards. We had layoff employees, people didn't get any raises for many years. So we're in a better place now. And hopefully, like you said, the next few years, we'll see where we're at. And Commissioner Hammond, you were talking about the merit raises. You know, one of the arguments, a lot of times people say, well, you have one employee that doesn't produce, or they're still don't keep up their standards. That comes back to, when I talk to the employees that has that concern, that comes back to that supervisor to document, train, notify, and then take discipline if that employee doesn't do their job. So if you do have somebody that's not performing, they surely shouldn't get a raise, and that's up to that supervisor to notify them, train them, provide, you know, notifications through that, and then take action if needed. So there's ways to measure that. So it's just some people, you know, there's always going to be somebody in the organization that's not happy. Even when you do a raise, somebody doesn't want more, they're going to say somebody else doesn't deserve it. So I think that's where that comes from a lot of times. They'll see some people give 110% and some people give 50%.
Oh, yeah.
That's the concern.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, I think Roger hit the nail on the head with what I was looking for, and that was the fact that, you know, the annual 3% is not an entitlement. I've been, I'll just be honest, turned off by employees who have talked to me one-on-one who have said, oh, we haven't gotten a raise in years. And I said, well, you got 3%. We've given you 3% every year since I've been here. That's not a raise. Yeah, that's a raise. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess I'll just get that out in the open, that it is a turnoff when I hear that. I think our staff and our employees and our team has worked incredibly hard and done incredibly great things this year when we've asked them to do different stuff than what they would typically do. And so I'm happy with supporting it this year. I just kind of wanted to get that off my chest.
Yes, sir.
I think the other thing is I'm very optimistic about where we're going as an economy once this thing opens up, and then you're competing for people. And, you know, we're never the highest in the market. We're not the lowest. We're trying to keep that balance. But we want to keep the best people. And if people can see that stabilized platform as opposed to going through the highs and the lows, I've been through that on the private side. Keeping people, retaining people is important. And it usually costs more when you have to replace people. So.
I just want to say one more thing. Again, I always commend staff and everything, but at the end of the day, we got to remember, if it wasn't for the staff in these buildings, there would be no government. Without the people here doing the job, there is no government. So in the private sector, people can step away from the job and somebody else will find the job and pick it up. But in our line of work here, if it's public works, transportation, EMS, whatever it may be, animal services, somebody steps away from that job. There's no one else to do that job. So without the people, there's no government. So got a bunch of empty buildings, though. So that's why we got to take care of those people.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let me wade in there. This is my least favorite subject, but one I feel obligated to speak to and have several times in the past. I want to dovetail to some extent on what Commissioner Pendergrass offered a minute ago about the merit, and you brought that up. It's a fair question to be brought up all the time. I was introduced to a merit pay increase my first year in the Florida legislature. And we had a combination cost of living, I don't know, 2 or 3, whatever it was, 40 years ago. But we also threw in a 5% merit increase. We put a gross amount in there that would allow department heads, in essence, to review the performance of their individual staff. And it might be 50 in one case or 300 in another. But anyhow, we said those people that work even harder than the average guy ought to get more. And so it's a merit. Boy, it sounds so good, and who could be against it? And I voted for it, and everybody voted for it. And I'll tell you, we had a Gulf Coast center that was, in the old days, we used to package mentally retarded folks, we called them at the time, and put them in a facility out there. We had 1,000 employees. There were 6 like that around the state. We had one. And of those 1,000 employees, there wasn't all 1,000 of them, but there was a bunch of them. I had a line in my office after we had adopted that, and they had implemented it. And I heard from everybody who did not get the maximum 5%, because Susie, who's doing the same thing I'm doing, she got it. And I worked just as hard as she did, and she didn't show up 3 times or something. It was a year-long battle, or not a battle, but you're doing your thing as an elected official. You voted for this. But let me tell you, it's, as Roger said, it's virtually impossible to implement fairly across the board. And as good as it sounds, it's something that's been tried over and over, and I was for it, and it just because it sounded so good, it's impossible to implement fairly. So we go back to this across the board stuff, and you're almost forced to. I want to talk about my experience in the private sector, and you can identify with this. I started a little insurance agency, and we were fairly successful. And after a while, we had 15, 18 employees, something like that. And I learned early on, this is back in the old days where the guys were the salesmen and the women did all the inside work. If you didn't have the top-notch women in your shop, some other agent, I was in the insurance business, was hiring them away from you. So I knew from talking with my competitors what they were paying their top people, and I knew from talking to my folks what they were. We made certain that our folks were always near the top because we didn't want the turnover. That's the worst thing that happened in any business or government. So we paid well and made certain we were always there. But we didn't overdo it either. There wasn't just an automatic 3%. We did Christmas bonuses and those kind of things. It's easier to implement that sort of thing in the private sector. But every employee got a turkey, not a big turkey versus a smaller turkey. They got the same 6.5 pound, well, I don't know, whatever it was. Yeah. But that was my experience in the private sector. So I know how important it is to keep our people paid where they're not inclined to leave. And I asked Roger when we were having private discussion on this a month ago, I said, I am not aware of people who are leaving Lee County government to take a better paying job in the private sector. I just don't know who they are. I haven't heard of them. They certainly haven't come to me before they left and tell me I'm leaving because you all don't pay worth of, and I'm going to the private sector. I think that is the most effective indicator of fairness across the board for what we are doing as a pay package for all the folks here. These are difficult conversations to have, and I really appreciate you bringing it up because we're sitting here with some of our top paid people. If they're being paid at $100,000 a year, we're talking about $3,000 we're going to put additionally in their pocket by across the board 3% raise. That is not small. But if we don't give them the 1.8 or whatever it is, Cecil, cost of living, whatever that number, and we can determine it close enough for our geographic area and all that, then it's the same as giving them a 1.8% cut in their salary this year. So we have to address that. And I told Roger I was more than able to recognize that so that nobody gets penalized for doing the good job they're doing. But when we go beyond that, and I don't know what the unemployment rate is. Roger and I talked briefly about this morning in Lee County. It's higher certainly than it was a year ago. In some areas, it's even worse. I was at a Rotary Club meeting this very day, and the speaker there was making reference to a foundation, he says, provides services for some lower socioeconomic folks. And he says, in the area we serve, those people are 80% unemployed. That's a unique situation, I'm sure. But we have areas that are 10% and 20% unemployed. And it's those unemployed people we are asking this year to help pay the increase of beyond cost of living. At a time when we don't have a turnover, nobody's leaving. This is a good place to work. So I'm having great difficulty in asking people that aren't working to give a raise to people that are working and are well paid and have a good benefit package with retirement and health care, as good as you can get in Lee County, private or public. I would have been much happier, and I told Roger, come back with something that is fair and across the board, and I would have jumped on it. I'm not sure where I'm going to be on this one. I don't feel good about going above, because we are plugging this in, and you and I have talked about this a lot. This gets plugged into our budget for next year. This 2.4 million, whatever, plus the constitutionals, what's the total? 7 or 8, 9, it's a bunch of millions up there that's going to be in our base for next year when we come back and we're sitting here again. So it's not just this year. So I've poured my heart out to all you people that I love and trust and are so appreciative that we've got the caliber of the quality of the staff that we've got around here. But we also, there's 700, 800,000 people out there that we also respond to. And I hear you talking to both groups, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate you opening this conversation up. But we got this 3% increase in this page that's up here, so I'm taking a minute to vent my annual vent. So thank you very much.
Well, I think concerned too of the people. There's still people hurting out there, and there will be probably after this year. But we're doing our part here with the Lee Cares. So we're trying to reach out to those people that are in need, and I'm hoping the Lee Cares program has been effective, and we're going to continue to help those people. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be back to normal, and people are back to work. We'll have a 2% unemployment, and get everything back to normal again. So, but at the end of the day, our employees will still be there doing the job 24 hours a day. And I support law and order, and I don't support any defunding of anything, support increased funding for those agencies.
You can see ahead like you can see ahead. You guys futurists.
Yeah, I will share that you and I had very similar deliberations on this then, Commissioner Mann, and I can go with the 3%. I got myself there because, again, I've seen some outstanding work this year that deserves where our staff and our CEO, for lack of a better term, our county manager landed on with his recommendation. And but I will tell you, I had very similar deliberations to what you had, and understand exactly where you're coming from. So, all right. You got anything, Commissioner Manning? No? Nothing? Okay. All right. So I don't know that you've gotten clearly what you need. What questions do you have, Roger? What do you need?
Pete,
Hit your green button.
Pick it up here.
do you have any more slides for this piece of the conversation?
No, I don't.
Okay, so Commissioners,
we've been through what we do with the excess reserves before, so.
Okay, so Commissioners, if this is the budget that you would like for us to bring to the public hearings, that's what we'll do. If you'd like something different, in addition to, subtracted from, then now's a good time to let us know so we can program it accordingly. Otherwise, this will be the budget we'll bring to you at the public hearing, first public hearing.
I'm okay with it. I just want to say for next year, I'll be talking about it next year, and not get ahead of myself. I've said it in the past. We have great reserves. I'm glad we have as much money as we have reserves. We do a great job that way. But I still like to get some of the money back in the community and put it towards projects throughout the community. If some sidewalks to whatever it may be, streetlights to improve the quality of life, and it's going to create jobs. That money is this reinvestment is going to get back in the community. Kind of the pay raise for the employees. Hopefully that increase the employees get, they'll go out and be consumers in the community, and they will increase their quality of life, and they will spend that money in the community. Instead of paying rent, maybe they'll buy a home and be a taxpayer then. So I just like to in the future, I think code enforcement, we've been having talks recently in different ways. Maybe it needs to increase in personnel there. If the next year's budget has that room for increased personnel that's a proactive way of improving our community. A lot of times we hear that they don't have enough staff to go out and enforce some of the issues we're having in the community. And again, the road projects, we've celebrated those the last couple of years, so thanks again for that work on those.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that's a start of a good conversation. We early in the year, we will have your annual strategic planning meeting, and that's a great time for those kinds of conversations. One of the discussions we've had among senior team members is the 20% general fund reserve. Considering the size of that reserve, the size of the budget, growth in the population, all these factors that we consider, we can probably doesn't need to be at 20%. We don't know exactly what that number is, but if we reduce that 20% to something less than that, then that frees up additional dollars for doing the kinds of things, Commissioner Pendergrass, that you've just suggested, for example. Right. So that, those be good conversations to have.
You never know. Like today, we spent over $10 million for conservation, great program. It might be in the future. We might have opportunity again, like another Kuiper Preserve, Edison Farms property to come up. And so it's nice to have the money there for that. But we just don't know what's going to happen after the next 6 months. So hopefully the next year will be better. But code enforcement has always been an issue where there's a lack of personnel. I know Commissioner Mann, that's something we all get throughout the board is, Lehigh Acres or North Fort Myers, for example, code issues, and I think sometimes our staff doesn't really have the resources to continue follow up on properties and stuff to fix those problems that people have. We're not trying to write tickets out there and make people find people. We just want compliance. So I think that's some of the concerns we hear from our residents in different areas of the county is code. That's one of the parts. Maybe I don't know if they need more personnel or if they need some. Maybe we need to look at some of the codes to increase the enforcement of some of those codes.
Yes, sir.
That reminded me of something of the 2020, and thank everybody for their strong support on those two projects this morning. Those are two great projects. It was a great program, and I think we're living up to the hopes and expectations of the voters a couple of years ago when they gave us such a strong mandate to continue that program aggressively. The question I started to ask this morning, I said, well, maybe I'll do it this afternoon. What is the balance in after those two purchases this morning? What is our cash balance available for 2020 under the budget we're about to adopt? Is it still close to 40 million, or is it under that now, or what?
No, it'll be somewhere between 35 and 40 million.
But we've included a $3 million bump or so in this budget.
Yeah, that will include that.
So it'll still be slightly under 40.
Slightly, yes.
And I guess it'd be impossible to answer the question of what do you see on the horizon this year, what the CAC is already dealing with, what cash money might we be called upon to commit this coming year? Is the 37 or so going to handle it? As far as we can tell, yes.
Yes.
That's the answer, yes. Okay.
Well, Commissioners, unless you'd like to do some additional review on the capital program, then I think we've told you everything we need to talk about today, and we'll take this budget forward to the first public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, let me just simply say this after my little sermonette. My nickname, Old 4-to-1, sometimes I'm proud of that and sometimes I'm not, but at any rate, anytime I have to vote 4-to-1 against something, it's difficult. It drives a bit of a wedge between the rest of the commission and myself. And unless it's something that is really critical to the future of Lee County that they're going to worry about 5 years from now, I try not to find myself on that minority singular. So I've said my concerns about that 3% across the rate, the board, but the cost of living adjustment is probably going to be close to 2% when you factor everything down for. I'm not going to go to the wall for 1%. So I'm saying, yes, take this budget to public hearing with my support. I will listen if there's members of the public. Maybe it'll be a chance to rethink it at some time, or maybe we'll just move forward. But I will support taking this in its form to the first public hearing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, you got to look at it like this. Remember I think our last budget hearing last year, I think 0 people showed up
Yes.
to talk about it. Same thing with throughout the year. I think what you could take away from that is the community's happy. They showed you their love and support last week, and we got some great staff here that I'm sure enjoys working with you. So it's a good thing.
Just a summary again, in my first full year, I saw some pretty extraordinary effort. It was a great year to be a commissioner for the first time. It kept coming. So what we did and how we did it was a credit to the one org. And I think that includes everybody. I agree, Roger. I think what was said, this can't be conceived as an entitlement every year. I don't know how sustainable it is in the future, but as Commissioner Mann said, a 1% over potential cost of living, I think is certainly reasonable. And again, I always have to go through a benchmarking thing, and I think when I look at the challenges that our governor has statewide and what he did, I think he's pretty much in line with what we're thinking overall. So I'm supportive.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anything, Commissioner Manning, for the good of the order? No? All right.
Commissioners, I can't thank you enough. You don't hear it often enough, I think, but we, when I say we, this is the collective, the entire organization. We appreciate the work you do. We appreciate the sort of political courage it takes sometimes to make these decisions, and we don't take it lightly, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, sounds like we've got a budget that will be advertised, and we'll have 2 public hearings on it. We'll be ready to go.
Yes,
We got a plan.
We got a plan. All right, if there's nothing else then for the good of the order, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
We'll see you.